Nice.
All
So,
right. Well, should we get started? You want to kick us off?
let's get started. So today I am joined by the esteemed, beautiful, excellent, nerdy, I might add, fundraiser, Jarrett Ranson. Yeah, she's got the glasses too. No kidding. So, and today we're going to talk about managing value-driven donor objections with confidence. Love that title. So good. So you've got a cause, and we are the Fundraising Academy. So I went and looked at the website for the Fundraising Academy because I thought, what a great way to introduce the Fundraising Academy. Are we recording? I think we need to set that recorder on. Are we
We are.
recording? Okay, good. All right, just testing. All right. So our goal at the Fundraising Academy, of which Jared and I are both trainers, is to work and help you nonprofit professionals with their career, with all of the courses we do, including this one today, and of course to help them be better at fundraising. Now, did you know, Jared, that the Fundraising Academy was started in 2014? That's the year I graduated high school. What a coincidence. Not true, but it's a good fantasy. In 2014, and since that time, we have been preparing literally thousands of nonprofit professionals to advance their careers and contributed positive societal change. And that contributing to positive societal change is the reason why I am at the Fundraising Academy, and probably the reason why Jarrett is there too. Because when you get at fundraising, guys, and you raise more money, all boats lift, including ours. So there are a lot of courses out there, and we'll talk some of them about some of those as we get to the end. But in the meantime, that's me. Oh, that picture, it's not that old. I think it was taken in 2014. No, but that's
Senior
me.
year of high school.
The year I graduated high school with honors. I should add that too. So I'm a trainer, as I said, at the Fundraising Academy. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm also a CFRE ambassador, and I CFRE study groups. In fact, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, I will be leading a study group of fundraisers from Kenya who are I'm going to get up at 7 a.m. in the morning. It will be 6 p.m. their time, and they are preparing to take the CFRE exam in Kenya. And of course, we want them all to pass the exam. So that's what I do. And look at this beautiful lady. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So Jarrett Ransom, that's my name. I use she, her pronouns. And I just want to say thank you for joining me today and to welcome to all of you. The next 90 minutes, I hope we have a little bit of fun. If you've joined us for any of these conversations before, in particular, this Jack and Jarrett duo, we're very casual in style. We really want to engage all of you in conversation. So thank you, thank you, thank you for using the chat. And we will have a couple of polls and community shares and all kinds of good things going on. I do call myself the nonprofit nerd. So thank you, Jack, for giving me, that title as I push my nose or my glasses up on the nose of my bridge. But one thing that I want to, really call out is I am feeling that donor conversations are harder than they used to be. And I've been doing this 20 plus years. I know, Jack, you've got some time under your belt since you graduated in 2014 as well. And many of you, which will be a poll here later, but really looking at it in a much harder way right now. So I want to name something. You're getting way far ahead, Jack. I need you to
No,
go
I
back
see it. I'm going to
three
have to fix
slides.
it. Sorry, I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm on slide
But
six and she's on slide seven.
donor conversations are feeling a little harder than
There
what they
we
used to be, and many of us are walking into conversations that feel emotionally charged, right? Like our country, our world is very divisive right now. They might feel value laden, sometimes even uncomfortable to have some conversations with donors. And if you found yourself second guessing what you say, maybe even avoiding some certain conversations or feeling drained afterward, I want you to know that you're not alone. And that is why I want to share today's conversation with you. Today is about giving you language, structure, and increasing confidence, right? So all of us can walk into those conversations feeling grounded, feeling prepared, and still fully aligned with your mission. So on this next slide, I want to share the objectives because this is what we're going to cover in today's conversation. First of all, I want to start by normalizing what many of you might be experiencing. Donor objections, they're not new, right? But the nature of objections, that's a hard word for me to say right now, they might have changed for some of you. So today's objections are often tied to identity, values, emotion, rather than programs or budgets. We're still hearing programs and budgets, but I think we're also really driving a lot of our decisions through that identity, value, and emotion. And I want to be clear, right? Objections are not a sign of failure. It does not mean that you are a bad fundraiser. Objections, they are information. It's another opportunity to collect data, and they tell us that a donor is engaged enough to have a reaction, right? Enough to have a response, enough to give us that additional information. So where we tend to get stuck is when we hear an objection and we immediately feel the need to maybe defend, explain, or convince that donor, right? And that's when conversations go sideways. So throughout today's conversation and the session, we're going to shift from seeing objections as something to handle to something to better understand. So I promised you a poll, and this next slide will give you the prompts, but Bianca on our Fundraising Academy team, she's going to launch this poll for us. It's pretty standard. We like to really offer this one to level set, to see who's in the room, this virtual Zoom room, if you will. So yeah, let us know, how many years of fundraising experience do you currently have? There's only one choice. So less than a year, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7, 8 to 10, and 10 plus. So we will keep collecting some of the data points here. Thank you. I love seeing this like calculate right in front of our eyes. Jack, are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's great. 28%, 10 plus years. Well, that's,
And 28 in the 1 to 3. Look at that
yeah,
balance.
it's great. It's great. And you know, the thing that I love the best about these polls, less than 1 year, I love those people. Because you know
Yeah,
what? They are starting off on the right foot. They are doing the right thing. Learning about fundraising
that's right.
today, it's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for everyone for participating in that poll. The next slide, I want to go over cause selling. That is what we are here with the Fundraising Academy. We use this very curated, if you will, 8-step cause selling cycle. And as we continue to move through this calendar year, 2026, right? Many of us, our nonprofits, we are facing, truly this rapidly changing landscape. And to ensure long-term success, we must build genuine relationships with donors. Now, if you've joined any of our conversations, through these monthly webinars, or probably any other conversation that you're hearing out there, it is really focusing on relationships with donors versus transactions and treating them like an ATM machine, right? Like we really have to focus on this genuine relationship with donors. So one of the most effective ways to achieve this is by incorporating this 8-step cause selling model that you see on your screen right here, and really seeing that, as a strategic planning opportunity for sustainable growth of your critical mission. So cause selling is about more than just fundraising, right? It's about creating these lasting connections with your supporters. And the first step is to understand your donors' motivations as well as their values. And by getting to know what drives them to give, right? What is motivating them to make this gift? You can tailor your approach to resonate with them personally. And then the next, you can focus on building ongoing engagement. And so I love that this cycle, if you will. And I used to talk about it. I think I was introduced to cause selling probably about 5 years ago now, Jack. And as I answered the poll, I've been doing fundraising 20 plus years. So I share that because 15 years into my career was when I was introduced to this model, and it has served me well. So, regardless of how you answered that poll, 1 to 3 years, 10 plus years, or somewhere in the middle, I want you to know that this cycle is for you. It is for your board, it's for your volunteers, it is for your entire team to really visualize and see how this cause selling integration develops deeper and deeper and deeper in this relationship-centric fundraising model. So there's lots of ways to do this. And as you can see, there are 8 steps and 3 key phases. Now, on this slide, we have circled handling objections. Again, that is what we're working on today. And I really think that I see objections throughout the entire process of this, but we really do hone in on it on this step 6 in that phase 2. And that's what we're going to really laser focus in on today. We've got some questions. I've got some anecdotal stories. I'm even going to turn the mic to Jack because I know he's got wonderful stories as well. And we just really enjoy with this Jack Jarrett duo, we really enjoy sharing some of our real life stories of how they might resonate and relate to many of you, right? Because we understand that you are in the trenches right along with us and that you likely have a very similar story. So, most of our webinars, if not all, really do hone in on this cycle. And there is tons of material, tons of curriculum. In fact, towards the end, we'll share with you about a bundle we have available to provide additional curriculum. We'll share about a portal, all kinds of good stuff. But anyway, when we look at cause selling and we look at the handling objection, the next slide, Jack, if you'll advance to that, I want to share with all of you a little bit about what we are seeing as some common categories of modern donor objections. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, objections are not new, right? What we're seeing as some of these objections, I believe, and Jack, tell me if you're seeing something differently, but we're looking at a lot of values misalignment. I know myself, I vote with my dollars every single day, right? And so we're seeing where people are contributing charitably in that same pattern, right? Direction, strategy concerns, maybe there's too much going on with the organization and they're just not, they being your donors are just not quite sure where you're going. Maybe you've lost some trust and even credibility. I was working with an organization and realized that, they really didn't have a lot of financial transparency within their 990s. Now, sure, you can find it online, but I really think it is in our best interest, if not even a legal, compliance issue, to share those 990s, to have them on our website. We shouldn't make our donors search for them, right? We should just have them. Also, a common category of modern donor objections that we're seeing right now is this emotional or identity-based discomfort, as well as some change fatigue or loss aversion. And so as we look at these common categories, I also want to call out from Q1, so this was last year, of the 2025 Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And we're just going to stay on this slide, but I'm going to share with you a little bit of that report. The number of donors in 2025 over 2024 declined 1.3% year over year. An increase, so we're going up this time, of 3.6% in total dollars were raised compared to 2024 levels. And this is driven largely by larger gifts. Now, for those of you that might be multitasking as I'm, presenting, again, this report is the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. So you can pull this up. You can fact check me, right, of what's being said here. Also, I want to share that there's been a significant decline in grassroots contributions, right? So some of the smallest donor groups, those who give between $1 and even $100, they made up 57% of all donors in Q1 of 2020. 2025 have experienced 11% year over year drop, right? And I always think of those donors as sometimes the test donation, right? We might be getting a younger demographic. They might be coming in and say, hey, I want to donate to this organization and see where my gift goes. Or I just want to kind of test this charitable giving and see how I'm treated in this relationship centric forecast and the environment, right? And so these are just some stats that I want to share with you because, again, objections are not new, but I think where people are focusing on spending their time and spending their hard-earned money is a little bit different in this modern world. So the next slide, I want to talk about maybe why these objections do feel harder today. And oh, Bianca, Ruby's just asking about the website of that report. So it's the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, but I'll let somebody else drop that link perhaps in there. So one of the reasons that I think objections are feeling harder today, again, a lot of us are tied to our identity, our values, and our beliefs. And now more than ever, which yes, is a statement we say probably too much in our sector, right? Like we are seeing it more and more and more, less about programs and more about meaning, right? Like broadly speaking, what does this organization stand for? How are they moving the needle? What is their critical mission? And not so much granular into the program or the program delivery. Also, it might feel harder right now because there's increased polarization and increased mistrust. So it takes a lot of more time, a lot more stewardship, conversations with our donors to really, maintain that level of trust and that level of credibility. Also, fear of damaging the relationship. So we could be seeing some of that. And I'm curious, Jack, because I know you do this day in and day out in all of these great CFRE groups. Do you feel that objections are harder today? And I'm curious if your answer is yes, if it aligns with more or less what I've shared here, or what if you're seeing something different. I want to hear that too.
No, I think you're. First of all, I love that you've the last slide and this slide because the donor objections, there's still objections from donors, but they've changed. Values alignment, as you said in the last slide, less about programs, more about meaningfulness to them, tied to identity, values, and beliefs. That's still true, but it's even more so. Blakely put in chat, it feels like younger donors prefer to give to specific immediate needs rather than taking a long-term approach. I think she's onto something there. And I think it fits in with
I would agree.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Adam,
I agree. Thank you, Blakely.
And Adam asked, please help us understand how polarization is measured. Thanks. Wow,
that is a great question. That is a tough one. And Jack, I'm curious if you have an answer. I do not have a solid answer on that, Adam, right? Of like, how do we measure this by way of a KPI or by way of, tracking the conversations? For me, it's more about having those conversations and really understanding, not necessarily pulling a report or seeing statistics on it. It's having those conversations one-on-one and really understanding the donor's perspective, where they are today in the world, where they are today with their investments and where they choose to put their dollars. And Jack, I'm curious from you if you were seeing it differently.
So I think in answer to Adam's question, I think we see polarization by looking at social media. What's going on in social media? What's rising to the top? And a disparity that we see between various groups. I think that's one way to measure polarization. The other thing is looking at the polls. Whether it's a Fox poll or a CNN poll or some other polls, especially as it relates to politics. So I think we see that both. But where we're really going to see, I think we really see polarization, especially in the political realm or in the nonprofit realm. You mentioned the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. What are the organizations that receive the most contributions in the US and Canada? There's a polarization there. religious institutions,
Mm.
healthcare, and education are consistently at the top, whereas other organizations like social services or international uh, nonprofits may be closer to the bottom. And that, I think this increased polarization is becoming greater and greater and greater. And guys, the way to overcome that is by doing uh, culture, a culture of philanthropy, by really sharing those values
Yes.
widely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's really important. So I hope, Adam, that shared a little bit for you as you think of this. Again, really go into your conversations. What are your donors sharing with you? How are you repeating back to them really what you're hearing and what's important to them as they share that? So the next slide, I want to talk about objections versus resistance versus disengagement and how these three really compare with one another. And I want you to ask yourself, think right now, right? Put yourself in a donor conversation. When you are faced with these difficult conversations, is your donor providing an objection? Like, are they truly objecting to the ask? Or maybe they're resisting. Have you considered those two? And then to add a third layer, it's, are they disengaging? Right? That's the ghosting of this world. So objections is really engagement. They're still talking to you, they're still responding, they're still meeting you for coffee, they're still coming to your events, but they still have a concern, and they still have this emotional concern tied to maybe not donating or donating at the same level right now. The resistance is the protection of that deeply held belief. And again, ask yourself if you can put yourself in a recent conversation. Was it an objection or was it a resistance? And that third is disengagement. Are they
Yeah.
withdrawing? Have they gone silent? Is there crickets in your inbox, right? Or crickets in your voicemail, meaning they're not responding to you. They are completely ghosting you. Any email you send, any event invite, any phone call is just not being responded.
Yeah.
And I would be curious in the chat, if you would just kind of type in if any of these three, maybe all three, are really resonating with you right now. If you could place yourself in this conversation, where do you think you are seeing the largest challenge in your cultivation, stewardship? Are you seeing it maybe truly objection? Are you seeing it purely resistant? And are you
Mhm.
seeing it disengagement? I see a couple of disengagement, and I'm
Yeah.
curious if any of you are kind of seeing more than one or all three. Oh, there's an all three, depending on
Audrey,
the
yeah,
donor.
yeah, she has that.
Yeah.
I think
Burnout,
you
likely,
mentioned,
yes.
when you mentioned, Jared, the fundraising effectiveness project and the fact that the number of donors has decreased, that's
Hmm.
disengagement. That's what
It
that
is.
tells me. And that is frightening. I'm wondering what you think about it. How does that affect everything we do? This loss of donors.
Well, to me, it ties us back to our retention, right? What are we doing to retain our donors and to maintain those relationships? We all know that donor retention is going down.
Yep.
Sorry, it's the amount is going up, right? So we are not retaining as many donors as year
Yep.
over year. And by now, maybe you've all heard the restaurant story, right? If you were to be a restaurant owner and only
Mhm.
30% of your customer base, maybe even 25% of your customer
Yeah.
base were to repeat a second time to your restaurant, right? Imagine constantly having to fill the tables, constantly having to get, new patrons every single night to your restaurant. We are seeing that similar effect within our donors. And Jack, you and I have been in and out of so many organizations throughout our career. I am still seeing one of the biggest reasons for the donor loss is the lack of stewardship.
Oh,
The lack of
absolutely.
stewardship.
Nailed it. Nailed it. You know that the other thing that's all of us should be very aware of, the fact that the number of donors is decreasing is going to affect everything we do in fundraising. That donor pipeline for major gifts and capital campaign gifts and legacy gifts is decreasing. That pipeline
Yeah.
of those donors who make small gifts and who enter the organization due to disengagement, it's going to affect your work down the road, guys. And retention, as Jarrett has said, is key. Great stewardship will keep your donors. Poor stewardship, and they're going to say, we're done.
Yeah. Almost to the point where I'm coaching my clients, Jack, that let's not even go for acquisition right now, right? Let's maintain this
Mhm.
focus on relationship and stewardship because honestly, friends, what is the point of acquiring new donors if we're not going to take care of them and we're not going to maintain that
Right.
relationship and keep them
Mhm.
coming year over year, engaging with them, understanding their motivation of giving? So I've kind of taken that bold, I know that's shocking as a disruptor in this space, but kind of that bold approach of like, hey, what's the point of doing any acquisition campaigns right now if we're not even internalizing stewardship properly with these donors
Mhm.
that we do have? So anyway, thank you for those
Great
that
point. Great point.
participated in the chat. The next slide is going to level set for the next two, but the next two slides I want to go over, are the root of most donor objections and how they surface from objection and or a root concern. We're also going to talk about what emotional drivers are for these objections. So this slide that we have up here is the surface objection versus a root concern. And I know you can read these bullets on the slide here, but I kind of want to go into each of them a little deeper. So, what donors say does not necessarily equal what they mean. So, donors' words in particular are often just the tip of the iceberg. I think we all can see that photo, right? It's like here's the iceberg, and then you've got everything else underneath the water. Their statements truly can mask a deeper motivation or hesitation, right? So, for example, a donor might say, "I can't give right now." But what they really mean, right, could be a concern about alignment with your mission, your timing, or trust in general. So I want you to listen when a donor says something like that, listen beyond the literal words, look for patterns in behaviors, not just the statement. So the surface objections, right, are often protective. What I want to share with you here is really donors frequently articulate objections as a form of self protection. They are truly safeguarding their values, their time, and probably their finances as well. So, where you might hear this in conversation would sound like, I don't have the budget. That may be less about money, in fact, and more about uncertainty about your nonprofit's impact or your nonprofit's priorities. So for here, I want you to, treat these objections as clues, not barriers, because they really do signal what the donor cares most about. So in this third one, I'm going to give you another example. The root concerns, they're emotional or they're values based because beneath every single objection is a deeper emotional concern. And it's usually tied to personal values, identity, and trust. Here's an example for that. Donors might worry and say something like, will my gift really make a difference? Jack, how many times have you heard that in your career?
Lots of times. And you know what? That
Lots of times.
objection comes from us. We create that objection by the messaging that we do. So if once I see these things that, and maybe you have as well, Jarrett, where somebody will send a letter out saying, last year we helped, I don't know, 30,000 families who were unhoused. And, when I look at that, I say, well, how would my $25 gift matter? It wouldn't really
Right.
matter. They need those major gifts or, any kind of thing. So I think that we sometimes create that my gift doesn't really matter into your organization by the messaging we send out.
Right.
So we have to be so careful that we are not fomenting those objections. And
That's
that would
right.
be bad.
Yeah, I think often we really do plant these objections in our language, right? Like the words in which we're choosing. But a strategy for this, in particular, the root concerns being emotional, values based, will my gift really make a difference? It's
Yeah,
engaging in a meaningful conversation to truly uncover what matters most to the donor. And we're looking for
right.
things like, is it the impact? Is it the mission, the alignment? Is it recognition for their gift? Or is it a personal connection? And I think that will also help to combat. Now, the fourth bullet here is really responding too quickly misses the signal, right? So
Mm,
jumping to counter objections or solving their concerns too fast truly can prevent you from understanding the real issue. Jack, I used to be guilty of this early in my career because I was very uncomfortable with objections. You too. Really uncomfortable with objections. They kind of made me squirrely. I wanted to get to a yes, and the no's and the objections really felt
mhm.
bad. So the tip here, right? Pause, listen, and ask these thoughtful, open-ended questions. Allow the donor space, right, to articulate what they're really concerned about, because the outcome, when you respond after fully understanding the root concern, your response is going to be far more effective and will build a lot more trust with that donor. So, you know, maybe you've heard it, but I say it too. It's like two ears, one mouth for a reason, right? Listen, listen, listen. And as fundraisers, again, early in my career, I had to get very comfortable with that awkward silence, to get
Mm,
very
yeah.
comfortable with just waiting. And also, it's a personality thing. I'm a very quick talker, very quick to make decisions. I'm not an analytics person, right? But when you're talking to a donor that is analytics and they literally need that time to process, that could be what's happening across from you, whether it's a phone call, a Zoom, in person. So just pause, right? Really listen and ask those thoughtful questions. So I think, in fundraising, words are signals. They really are. And our job as a fundraiser, professional fundraiser, is to truly to decode the signals, not just react to the words. So we're listening deeply, we're responding thoughtfully in how we move from transactional asking to this meaningful donor engagement that is really built into the cause selling curriculum. So the next slide, I want to go into these emotional drivers of objections. And again, you've got some bullet points here, and I'm going to kind of go through each of them a little further to elaborate. The fear of change or loss. This is when people naturally resist change because it threatens what's familiar or comfortable to them. An example may be, donors might be hesitant to give to a new initiative if they fear that it replaces something that they value, right? If you have a new initiative, they might be thinking, what about this other one that I've invested in for years? Or, is that going away? Is this in place of? So acknowledge the fear if this comes up in conversation, provide reassurance, and clearly explain what will remain consistent.
Yeah.
That will really buy you a lot of trust and credibility. The second one is around confusion or lack of clarity. So when we have uncertainty, right, we are often creating hesitation or even that disengagement that we talked about. So an example of this is donors might be holding back if they don't understand how their gift will be used or what impact it will make. So to your point, Jack, like, will my gift even make a difference? We need to
Yeah.
tell them what a $25 gift will do, what a $5 gift will do, what a $5,000 gift will do, right? We need to communicate this clearly, simply, and consistently, because that clarity will reinstate and also build the trust and the confidence with our donors.
Matt,
Speaking of trust, yeah,
Matthew
Jack.
has, sorry, Matthew has a question in chat. I just thought I'd
Okay.
chat,
Yeah.
ask you about it. He's wondering, if we have a list of questions to consider, when we get an objection in the next slide or whatever. And I think the way I would answer that question, and help me out with this, Jared. Let's say
Yeah.
you're the fundraiser and I'm the donor, and I say to you, you know, I'm not sure, that my gift is going to have an impact on this cause. And you said very, very rightly in the last, when we talked about ask an open-ended question, and something to
Mhm.
clarify what Jack's objection is. And I think that if I said to you, I don't think that my gift is going to have impact, what would your response be to that?
Well, I have seen in particular the impact of a donor who has given $25 every month for like 12 plus years, right?
Yeah.
And I sat down with this donors, husband and wife in New Mexico. We met at this cute little bakery in Santa Fe. I printed out their donor report because they have never seen it. And it literally was like $25 every single month for the last 12 years. And I said, I want to show you and demonstrate to you just how much of an impact you have made, not
Yeah.
just this
Great.
year, but these cumulative years over time. So that was a consistent donor, right? But I do think there's opportunities to demonstrate that level of impact with a $25 gift, a one-time, $25 gift, or a
Yeah.
one-time $2,500 gift. I think there's ways when we talk about our programs and we talk about our impact that there are ways to do that, whether it's a one time or my example of meeting with this couple that had been giving consistently year over year. And they literally, Jack, were in tears because, first of all, they kind of forgot that they were giving. I mean, it was just on repeat, right? They
Yeah.
forgot that they were giving $25 and they had no idea that it came up to, the total cumulative amount. And that just made them feel so good. So
Yeah.
that's been a strategy that I've used and I have seen it literally just turn this couple to like happy
Yeah.
tears.
I love that answer, and I think it's great. But, Matthew, think of it this way. I've had donors say to me, I'm not sure your organization is effective. And as Jarrett said in the last slide, ask an open-ended question like, what specifically do you think we're not doing that we should be doing? Ask those open-ended questions, get involved in a conversation, try to understand the objection better. Is there a list of open-ended questions? We have lists as it relates to the cultivation process, or discovery through
Right.
that cycle that Jared talked about earlier. But I think it's really dependent on what the donor's objection is. Am I correct in thinking that? And to what the next
I think so.
question? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to answer your question, we do not have on the next slide, spoiler alert, it is not these questions, but within our curriculum, we definitely do have questions that you can ask your donor. I know CFRE training offers some of them as well. Like there's really some wonderful questions, open-ended, thoughtful, meaningful to really get to the core and the motivation. So really, really good questions here. I want to go through the remainder of these bullet points before we advance into listening. But when we look at mistrust, right, from past experiences, truly negative past experiences and these interactions can negatively influence some current perceptions and willingness to engage. Here's an example of that, right? A donor may have felt ignored or even undervalued by previous nonprofits. So this could be another nonprofit, Jack, not even yours, not the one where you're working, but they could have had a really, bad exchange, if you will, with another entity. And so you might just have to build trust with them based off of how you handle these relationships and how you manage them as a donor. The fourth bullet point here is around that misalignment in our values. And so, again, people want to support causes that reflect their personal beliefs as well as their personal priorities. So, an example here would be if a program does not align with a donor's core values, even a generous donor, a long-term donor, a blank check donor may hesitate. They may decide this year is not the year that they want to give to this organization or to this cause. So an approach for this is to connect your mission and your impact to shared values with this person, right? Showing alignment with what matters to them. And I think, Jack, again, we've done this Jack Jarrett duo many times. And I love the story that you talk about working at a healthcare organization. You talk to someone, and I think your notes in the database might have said that they were interested in one program where actually they were interested in something else. And I can't recall exactly what the delineation was, but you really heard this donor out and you said, basically tell me more about this. And you, of course, corrected the notes in the database. So guess what? Not only you didn't make that mistake again, but no one after you. So I think, really making sure you're aligning to what they have told you is
Right.
a value alignment and not just assuming that it must be something else. Do you remember that story?
I do remember that story, but it's interesting because remember we were talking before we came on the webinar about the use of AI. You're bringing up
Yes.
a donor record, and one thing that I think a great use of AI, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, Jared, is that if
Mhm.
you really are meticulous, guys, in keeping those notes in your database, your CRM, you could run an AI program of those notes asking the question, what kind of objections, based on my conversations with this donor, can I anticipate coming up when next I meet with her? And I
Yeah.
mean, you and I talk about the growth of AI in so many different ways. What do you think about that? I mean, how do you feel about that?
So I think that there are so many great ways to incorporate AI into our strategy and how we are approaching, right, our donors. And you're right, many donor databases are also including or incorporating rather this AI component. So my first thought off the cuff, right, is we always want to make sure that whatever we're putting into AI is safe and that we're being cautious about the data, right? We're not putting addresses, we're not putting net worth, we're not putting, the exact name of the person, but I think we could give like a hypothetical, clean up those notes if they're too detailed. But there is an ethical way to do this with integrity, right? Donor
Right.
ethics in mind, to think of that. And absolutely. And I think we should be poking holes in all of our case for supports, all of our case statements, all of our sponsorship
Mhm.
packages, anything that you're soliciting, we absolutely need to poke holes and figure out what would be an objection. What might
Yeah.
we consider here? And yes, Jack, we can absolutely go into the granular donor by donor, case by case basis to say, okay, this particular donor, Jack Alato, right? This is what I know about Jack. So what objections might I want to prepare for so that if they
Yeah.
were to come up in conversation, I already know how best to respond.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that you mentioned this.
And your point is critical. AI is only as effective as the data it's reviewing. If you are putting notes, like your example, what I told you when I worked in healthcare, if I put in notes that Jared is interested in behavioral health, and that's
Right.
incorrect because she's really interested in, I don't know, women's health, then
That's
then
right.
when I run AI through it or when I look at it with my eyes, I'm going to come up with something that is not going to be effective in my communications and messaging to
Yes,
her. And I've
that's
made
right.
that mistake more than once, maybe twice
Mhm.
or 100 times, where I am sending a message to a donor saying, "Hey, Jared, thanks for your interest in behavioral health." And Jared calls me up and says, "Jack, I'm not interested in behavioral health. I'm interested in women's
Mhm.
health or oncology or some other healthcare service at your institution." So whatever you put, it just speaks so importantly back to donor retention that you mentioned, that we are accurate in what we're putting in our donor records.
That's right. Yes, thank you. And the final bullet here is really this desire to be heard and respected, right? Everyone wants their opinions, their concerns, and even their contributions acknowledged. And an example here could be that the donors respond positively when they feel genuinely listened to rather than rushed or dismissed. And I have to tell you, even for me, right? If I get a donor acknowledgement letter to Mr. Jarrett Ransom,
Oh,
I know for certain they have not paid attention to either me attending their event, me talking to them. I've even had this, Jack, when I have talked one-on-one with a fundraiser, and then I still get a Mr. Jarrett Ransom record. So I want you to actively listen. I want you to validate their perspectives. I want you to pay attention, right? And really reflect back to them what's important and what you're understanding without immediately trying to solve what you think might be that big objection. So lots to cover there. But I also want to move us into this next slide, which is around listening for meaning. Again, two ears, one mouth for a reason. So we really should be listening without preparing a response. That is how we know that we can truly, what's the right word here? We can truly discuss what it is that they are bringing in the conversation, not our pushed agenda, right? And so if we show up at a meeting and we have exactly how we want it to go, but the donor is actually guiding the meeting based off of their signals and we're not paying attention, right? This could really go awry. So true listening means you're fully focused on the speaker, the person you're meeting with, instead of planning what you're going to say next. So again, pause, absorb, and resist the urge to immediately answer. I also want you to notice your tone, your emotion, and your emphasis in your conversation. Pay attention not just to the words that you're using or the words that they're even using, but how something is said, right? How are they articulating? What tone are they using? Are they incorporating pauses? Because those are signals. For example, a quiet, hesitant statement may actually indicate doubt or discomfort. An empathetic phrase might signal a strong value or priority. So you want to listen to how things are said. That will give you insight beyond the literal words. And then I also want to give you permission, right? We need to ask clarifying, open-ended questions. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but these open-ended questions, they encourage elaboration, right? They uncover deeper concerns or motivations. Another example of what this could look like is, can you tell me more about why that matters to you?
mhm.
Or another question could be, what would an ideal outcome look like? And have them tell you what that is, right? From this, the outcome is that you gain richer understanding and you show that you value their perspective. And then finally, here, I want you to reflect back to them what you heard them saying. Paraphrase or summarize, right? Like what they told you, and say it in a confirming, understanding way. And that might come across when you say something like, it sounds like your main concern is fill in the blank. Or, you also say, did I get that right? Because you're saying it back to them and then you're confirming that. This is a huge benefit because it validates their perspective, it prevents any potential misunderstandings, and it truly encourages this deeper conversation. So listen, listen, listen. This is a really big piece. And I'm thinking to many of you in the poll, I think there was 28% at that 1 to 3 years. This is where I went wrong, totally wrong in my first 1 to 3 years of this career, right? I wasn't listening to understand, I was listening to respond. So
Mhm.
listening for a meaning is really important. Okay, this moves us into a community share. And so we are going to use the chat for this. And if you'll just, I think, advance a couple of more, we've got 2 questions here, Jack, and I think this is an animated slide. So when you look at your donor's journey, in particular through the cause selling cycle, I want to know from you which were the most challenging, right? If you can think of, was it presenting to them? Was it making that big bold ask? Was it stewardship? Maybe it's the objection. And also, like, how did you overcome this challenge? If you can share that with us, I'm really curious. And Jack, I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind, as our friends are typing away. Because what
Sure.
I love about when we type, we've got 86 of us here, right, for this conversation, and many are going to be listening to the recording as well. But I love having your chats because we learn in community. So please take some time to share your answer here, share in this community. And Jack, if I can put you on the spot and you can
Sure.
answer this for yourself again while
Sure.
our friends are typing.
Do you want me to put it in chat or you want me to just say?
I want
What?
you to talk, if you would, while we have our other
Sure.
friends
Sure,
typing
sure.
away.
So what are the objections that I'm hearing the most of? You know, I think the objection is that they're because of inflation, because of, other expenses, they cannot make the same size gift that they may have made in the past. And,
Mhm.
that's a tough one. That is a tough one. If it's a major gift and they say, I just can't make a gift right now because, of whatever, I think my response to that objection is, when can I check back with you? Whatever it is. I mean, showing gratitude is number one, of course, but definitely, asking when you could get back in touch with them to have a discussion about this. And they'll tell you, and then make sure you do get back in touch with them. I see
Right.
there are lots of things in chat here. Um,
Good.
let's see. Wow. Uncertain about the economy right now. A lot of people have tariffs, economy, uncertain about, expenses. Um, and I love this. Matthew writes, giving the donor grace without forcing a conclusion to the ask. Time heals. Absolutely, time heals.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. And you know what? That's a very I always say we should have to love our donors even when they object and they say no. We just have to love them because they do have the heart of our mission inside them, and it just might be a
Mhm.
bad time. That's great. I don't do
You know,
politics. That's hard. I know politics are seem to be pervasive now, but that's good. That's a good policy.
yeah,
Let's see.
these are great. I really appreciate everyone sharing here.
And
Okay, who is this that um oh sorry, I'm catching up here. Who just mentioned empathy?
I saw
Oh,
that. Yeah.
Arden. I see Arden. Okay. So I'm going to take that as the segue. So thank you, everyone. And if you're still typing, please type. I'm going to move on into empathy is not agreement. So thank you for this perfect segue. So the next slide is really all around, really looking at empathy as a way, again, of we're not agreeing. So recognizing and naming what someone is feeling. This doesn't mean that you agree. It means that you see them, you hear them, that you are affirming that their, feelings, they matter. So you could say something like, I hear that this, feels frustrating to you. That signals that you're listening, right? That doesn't say, I absolutely agree with you. It's because acknowledging their emotion will build trust and open space, right, to have future honest dialogue. And so you're really just moving into that. Agreement endorses position, right? So agreeing with someone can unintentionally signal that you share their viewpoint or you are conceding. So you might consider saying something like, you're right, too quickly, right? Like maybe that just kind of is a default phrase that comes out of your mouth. That actually reinforces a misconception or a concern could go unchallenged there. So a tip that I want you to consider in that kind of instance is to distinguish between acknowledging emotion, having that empathy, and agreeing with the content of what's being said, because that's two distinct um, actions there. The third one here is you can validate feelings and you can hold boundaries. So again, validation does not equal compliance. You can recognize someone's experience, right, while maintaining your limits. Something you might sound like this. I understand why this is upsetting. Here's what we can realistically do, right? And that really balances empathy with structure. And the benefit of this is that it helps you to protect relationships and your capacity while still building rapport. The fourth one here is around confidence and how, confidence comes clarity, not control. So being clear about your purpose, your expectations, as well as your boundaries, this communicates strength more than trying to dominate a conversation. And an example of this might sound like, here's what we can do together and what's not possible right now. Right. So that demonstrates leadership without being dominant or aggressive. And the takeaway is that people will truly respond better to your transparency than to attempts, right, at controlling their thoughts or their feelings. So again, regardless of how we're approaching these conversations, I want you to keep in mind that empathy is not agreement. And I hope that these examples I shared with you gives you, again, tools, resources, confidence. That was part of the objective today, is really to rebuild or to strengthen your confidence in this. So as we move forward, I want to talk in this next slide around de-escalation language that actually works, right? Take a screenshot. You will get access to this, but if you need it right now because you have a meeting later today or maybe even tomorrow, right? Go ahead and take a screenshot of this because these are wonderful resources, phrases that you can be ready to state. And when I do coaching with my clients, right, I always tell them to be prepared with a very solid professional statement. These are 4 professional solid statements that you can use at almost any time to de-escalate language, and it will help you out in that situation. Again, we're validating that their feelings, what their emotions, right? We're validating, we're not necessarily agreeing. And we're also asking some open-ended questions in this time frame. Jack, I'm going to put you on the spot again because we tend to do this to one another. Are you finding any other questions or statements helpful and beneficial to you in de-escalation right now?
So, I think these 4 really cover the gamut. I think that something you said, especially number 2 up here, the second bullet point, I hear how important this is to you. What do donors want? What does everyone want? What does your husband want and your children? They want to be heard. And they want you to acknowledge that you hear them, no matter what the objection is. But I do think, back to something you said on the last slide, which is really important, is boundaries. There are some things that donors are going to say to us which we cannot de-escalate from. And maybe it's just things that are racial or ethnic or religious or political that we really don't have to, some things that donors have said to me in my career, I don't want to ever talk to them again after, honestly, this is going to happen to you guys. They're going to say things that are so outside of your moral compass that you're going to want to I don't really want to be around this person anymore. That's happened to me. Has that ever happened to you, Jarrett?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Just horrible things.
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
some
Well,
really. Go ahead.
and I appreciate what you said. I hope these 4 cover the gamut, some
Yeah.
version of this, right? But be prepared because, it's really important for us to have something that's a neutral statement, open-ended question, to really de-escalate if a conversation is going in a direction that makes us uncomfortable,
Yeah.
get us back to our mission, get us back to for the purpose of the
That's key.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
that is
I think
key.
I think that, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I think that's so important because that says that you've heard them. Thank you for being honest about that. That says you've heard them. I can hear
Yeah,
how important this is to you. You've heard them. Can you tell me more about what's behind that? I love that open-ended question because it's going to
that's
draw
great.
out. It's going to bring out. They're going to
Yeah,
get to. You're going to get to the bottom of what it is. So those
right.
de-escalating questions are important. But guys, I have to say, remember your boundaries. What some things that, because I know it's really important. We're in a revenue dependent business. We want those donors to give us a gift, but there has to be some boundaries. I'm reading people talking about in fundraiser bill of rights, people talking about bringing that. And I think there are some important things about that as it
Yeah.
relates to you.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Well, this next slide, I'm curious if any of you can relate to these, right? Like these are some common response traps if you didn't have the questions or the statements that I gave you in the earlier slide. I'm not going to ask you to out yourself, right? Or to add it in the chat, but just think to yourself of these that you see on the screen here. Did you show up very defensive in that conversation? Was that your immediate response? Or did you start to over explain and justify, right? Maybe you started data dumping to avoid emotion altogether. You're just like, not going there. Let me just dump data, data, data. Maybe you rushed to the resolution, or maybe you were trying to win the conversation, right? And I know I've been guilty of some of these, absolutely, in my career. But again, hopefully the de-escalation language that I provided in the earlier slide helps you feel more confident, more stable, more relaxed, able to have this conversation in a way that is focused solely on your mission and on this mutual respect, even if you don't see eye to eye with your own moral compass in life and how you choose to walk through life. But again, I have been guilty of some of these common response traps because they've just like immediately jumped out. So I wanted to throw that up there for all of you to say, oh yeah, maybe you can start to realize when you're starting to feel defensive, or you start realizing that, you know what, I am data dumping. Let me take a pause, let me breathe and see how I might approach this differently. This is around building your confidence in objection, and how you navigate these objections, right, will really make a difference. So as we move forward, we're going to go into reframing objections into engagement opportunities. So the next couple of slides, and you can go ahead and advance if you would, Jack, is, really around, we talked about these earlier, and I want to reiterate and frame this in signaling. So one of my examples when it comes to objections as engagement signal, I was meeting with another husband and wife, not the same husband and wife in New Mexico, but a different one. And we sat down for lunch, and I was asking for a major gift, six figures. And they literally pulled out our guide star profile, and they said, let me tell you, based off of your rating here, here, and here, right? I know, we are not prepared to make an investment of this size until we see some improvements here. Let me tell you guys, I did not expect that. That came completely out of left field. And I was like, well, that's one for the storybook, right? So guess what I do now, Jack, before I meet any donor is I sure do take a look at our guide star, candid profile. But that's an example that, really came up for me was I did not have this in my, what are we saying now? That wasn't on my bingo card then. But, now it is. But it also told me their objection to our ask truly signaled engagement. It signaled financial transparency. It signaled a large desire to make a significant gift, and what we needed to do to rebuild their trust. So I wanted to share that as you look at some of the objections as engagement signals, because this experience that I just described to you, this couple was extremely engaged, right? And they were signaling as loud as they possibly could. And that was my takeaway. So, Jack, do you have an example that you could
Yeah.
share of an objection as an
So
engagement signal?
I remember once I met with a major gift donor, and I actually brought my board chair to come to this ask. It was a $40,000 ask, and I was sitting down. We met in a hotel lobby, and we started talking. And the donor said to me, "Why did you ask for this meeting?" And I said, and I started to sweat, and I was getting hot, and I was sitting next to my board chair, and I said, well, because, we want to ask you for this gift of 40,000. And the guy said to me, well, I think you've wasted my time. I don't understand why and he went into this whole big thing. I was just sweating more and more and more. And in fact, at the very end, he said, well, I'm going to give you the 40,000. And I almost, my board chairman said to me, afterwards, he said, I was about to jump in and tell him, stop. But I didn't. I said, well, the $40,000, I think I could go, get a little hot under the collar. But I think, keep engaging with donors. And trust me, I mean, I worried about that guy afterwards for several months. Would I ever be able to meet with him again or talk to him? And the next time I met with him, he was just beautiful. So people, they have bad
A
days. Our
delight.
donors have bad days, and they
Yeah,
they're
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 people.
busy. Yeah,
They're people too.
they're busy. Maybe
Yeah.
their child gave them attitude in the morning, or what needed their breakfast, or whatever it is. And so we have to really, you know, be accepting of
Yeah,
things that might be bothering them. So
that's right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I always love hearing your stories, Jack, because I know you have some good ones.
oh Lord, I should write a book. You should write a book. In fact, you know what? I think we should create a persona, Jarrett Jack. A
Oh yeah.
person.
We
I love that
We could
idea.
do that. We could do that. Well,
Yeah.
we don't have much time here, but I've got just a few more slides. And I know, Jack, you've got some information to share at the end. So, when we talk about redirecting shared values, I wanted to share these four key bullet points to me, right? I want you to identify where there's overlapping beliefs. And I'm not talking personal beliefs of yours, but the donor's beliefs and your mission's beliefs and how you're working, in that shared space. Name these shared commitments explicitly. What are they? And again, where can you get on the same page? Connect values to that mission impact, right? I hear that you really value access to behavioral health, right? And so really let me tell you about the mission impact that you would be contributing to the success in regards to this that's so important to you. And then also let alignment, not pressure, right? Guide your next steps. And then I also, in this next slide, when to pause and when to have permission to disengage. So I want you to know it's okay to pause. It's also okay to disengage, even temporarily, to come back at a time that is best. And my best example for this is when a couple tells me that, now's just really not a good time for me to make a commitment to my gift right now. I have triplets going to college. And I have gotten that example, right, Jack? And I just say, oh, well, first of all, let me remind you all, I was born and raised in the South. And so that's when we say, oh, bless your heart, right? Like, oh my gosh, three kids, freshmen in college. I can only imagine. Also, there's life dynamics, right? Like I've worked with donors going through divorce. I've worked with donors who have lost their partners. Like there's just so many ways in which I really do want you to honor the human that you're talking to, and that not every objection must be resolved right now. In fact, the opposite, pausing, right? And even disengaging temporarily can preserve trust, because guess what? I followed those triplets. I made sure that, I knew when they were sophomore, junior, senior, right? Because now we're just getting to re-engage in some conversations around what's still important to this donor, this family, multi-generational giving. There's lots of opportunities there. And again, respectful disengagement is, values aligned. And then lastly here is the long-term relationships, again, giving yourself permission to pause or even disengage. That allows you to build this rapport. And honestly, like this long-term relationship, that means more than the short-term win. It really, really does. And I know in my career, Jack, yours, I'm sure as well, how many times have we worked with a donor? We've worked towards a significant gift, right? It might not have been realized in our position, but years down the road, decades, right? And then we see a family name on a building and it's like, wow, that was years in the making. And, in some cases for this. So I'm passionate about that as a professional fundraiser, because what I'm doing now is not for the short term, right? We want to have short-term wins and we want to have long-term sustainable, which kind of goes back to my earlier point around stewardship and how important that is, because what's the point of acquisitions if we're not going to, maintain these relationships and continue to build on the trust? So this takes me to our key takeaways. Our time is coming to an end. But again, I want to remind you, objections are information. It's not failure. You are not failing if you get an objection. Listening is a strategic skill. Use it. Also, empathy truly builds trust without compromising your mission. And your confidence comes from values clarity. Again, I shared with all of you that objections really scared me early in my career. And now I see it as another opportunity to get additional data, right? Continue the conversation and really have these values aligned conversation. So I want to give you some homework. I'm not going to check it. You're not going to turn it in. But on this next slide, Jack, I do want to share of what you can do now. And this is an invitation, right? I want you to identify one upcoming donor conversation. I want you to practice slowing down your response, lead with curiosity, not correction, and reflect on what the objection may in fact be signaling now that we've gone through, almost 90 minutes of this content is really seeing objections differently, right? It's just a different perspective. It's additional data. We have the ability to be curious, collect additional data, and to align. And again, we really need to slow down. We need to listen and we need to reaffirm the donors. So that brings me to questions. I know, Jack, we've answered several throughout today's conversation. This puts me at an end of my presentation. It's been a wonderful honor to do this with you, alongside you. So yeah, if we have any burning questions now, Jack and I can take them.
You're so crystal clear that they're just questions. I love that. And you are clear.
Oh, I love this from Audrey. I use WAIT, which is an acronym for Why Am I Talking? It reminds me to be intentional with each donor, taking time to thoughtfully listen and respond. Thank you for sharing that.
WAIT. How does your method differ from moves management? That's a good question.
Adam, you're full of great questions.
Yeah.
To me, my response is it is a form of moves management. Yeah. And that's how I use it. In fact, I'm working with a client now. We use Salesforce. I am agnostic to donor databases. I've worked with many of them. I certainly have some favorites, but and really like building out opportunities that align with cause selling. So right now, I don't think there's a cause selling. There's not a donor database that incorporates cause selling, but most databases can in fact be customized. And that's how I use this. I use cause selling as a moves management.
Yeah. I look at moves management as a series of moves that we
Mhm.
initiate to move the donor through the donor journey. At each stage of that move, all of those moves are opportunities for donors to present objections. And so I think with
Great.
what Jarrett is saying right here is all of these techniques and tools that she's given you this today can be used no matter where you are in that donor journey. I think moves management is another great tool. So great. Love weight. People are saying honor, not Bonnie.
Yeah.
Stop is also helpful in conversations. What does stop stand for, Mary? Did I miss it? Maybe it's up ahead. What does stop
Well, there's
stand?
one, take a breath, observe, proceed with awareness.
Okay, that's nice. Stop, take a
Yeah.
breath, observe. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
stop.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mary.
Mary.
Someone else added waste and it's weight with an S. And it's why am I still talking?
Oh gosh, I should ask myself that question way more times than I do.
Oh, that's great.
Great. Okay. So register fundraisingacademy.org. So you're looking at, so here's how to connect with each of us on our little QR code, but join our mailing list, guys. There is so much stuff that will help you in your career journey at the Fundraising Academy. So join our email list, get in touch, let us get in touch with you, tell you what we're doing. Jared and I are both presenting at AFP Icon. And if you're going to be at Icon, look us up, talk to us, meet us, come and visit with us. I love to meet people who have been on webinars with us. So definitely do that. So, and register for our no cost online learning portal. Here's the operative words here: no cost. There's no cost. So you should join us there, and you're going to hear this webinar will be up there in our learning portal later today. I'm sure. I think Bianca said it. She said it in a chat earlier. Join us on there. Scan now. There's blogs up there. Jared and I have both written blogs that are up there on the online learning portal. So get in touch with us. You're going to learn a lot up there. It's awesome. And then, of course, our next webinar is Kristen Wantland and Deandra Hicks, who will be the moderator. And what an exciting, it's Wednesday, March 18th. Mission Retainable, data-backed strategies to keep donors coming back year after year. Really awesome. I'm looking forward to attending this. I will be there. I don't know Kristen, but she works for Bloomerang. I do love that company and I do have a bias towards them. And I've met with them. They're great. So it should be a wonderful presentation. Register for this, guys. There's the QR code in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And of course, cause selling. Jared very articulately talked about cause selling early on. Remember, there are lots of benefits, comprehensive trainings. This bundle is designed for all experience levels, and we saw all experience levels in our poll early on. It's also where you'll find things like dealing with donor objections, like this webinar here. It's self-paced learning, and I love that I was involved in the creation of that. It's really good. And look at that, 45 continuing education credits from CFRE. That's more than half you need to meet the educational requirements. And I'll tell you, Jared, I got tons of questions from study group participants who ask me questions. How can I get CFRE continuing education credits? Right here, right at the online learning portal, etc. So make sure you join us. Guys, and Jared, I'm sure, thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of today's webinar. Get in touch with us. You could reach me at jalato@nu.edu. Jarrett, what's your email at NU? Must be,
It's J Ransom. So first initial, last name.
yeah,
Yes.
we're all there
Like
at
hold you for
NU.
ransom. Yes. Which is a great fundraiser's last name. I have a lot of fun
Oh,
with that.
oh, I bet. Yeah. My last name, like
Yeah.
Lotto, is that a Lotto winner?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
There you
we
go.
thank you. I love some of the people. I know them from Janet, from Canada. It's good to hear from you. And it's just great. What a great group. We love our webinar attenders, don't we? And we
That's
love our
right. Yeah,
fundraisers.
we
We love
do.
we love you guys. And so thank you
Yeah.
so
And we
much
hope
for
to see
joining.
you in these monthly webinars and yes, at Icon. Patricia, yes. The answer is yes. That is my brother at University of Georgia. That's small
Nice.
world. I love it.
Yeah. It's 1 degree of
Yeah.
separation between Patricia and
That,
you, and that's Jeremy.
that's
Great name,
it.
by the way.
And I want to tell you, Patricia, I was fundraising well before he was,
Oh,
but
and your
it's
brother's a
always a fun
fundraiser
banter.
too. It must be genetic.
Yes,
It must be genetic.
at the University of Georgia. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Thank you so much. Any questions before we go? We have about 6 minutes, I guess, right?
I will
Anything?
just call out Elizabeth and Michelle. You each had questions in the chat, and I responded to them in text. So wanted to just call that out. I didn't see any others that were really still pending, Jack. But
Yeah.
you can
I
always reach
don't
out
think
to us.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy to get in touch with us, and definitely follow us on LinkedIn to hear
Yeah.
what's coming up for us. I next week I think I mentioned I'm doing a CFRE study group with fundraisers from Kenya. I'm excited about that. And Saturday and
Yeah.
Sunday I have a study session. If anybody wants to join, it's free. And my study group gets 42 continuing education credits as well. So
Yeah.
love to have you there.
Jack, would you go back to our QR slide? Someone's requesting our contact slide be back up.
Oh,
And I
sure.
apologize, Elizabeth and Michelle. I sent my response only to the host and panelists. So I've now copied it to everyone. So hopefully you can see that. My apologies.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I
All
love
right.
QR codes. Aren't they nice these days? They're so great.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
so
the deck.
and the deck.
Somebody's asking, yeah, if they get the deck.
Yeah, Janet, that I think Bianca put up that it will be up on the online learning portal later today, right? Isn't that what she said, Jarrett?
That's right.
Yeah. So
They're always
and
up on the portal, so
yeah,
you can get them there. And you can also access previous ones. And spoiler alert, future ones will be there as well. So,
great.
yeah.
Anything else
All
in
right.
4 minutes we have left? So what's
That's it
coming
for
up for
me.
you?
It's been
I'm
wonderful.
doing I have two things I'm doing. On Friday, I'm doing strategic planning for AFP desert communities, and in March, I'm doing monthly giving for AFP Buffalo. So that's coming
Ooh,
up. And of
fun.
course, I'm doing a DAF training in Little Rock, Arkansas on March 19th. And all of these things are available both in person as well as via Zoom. So that's all out
Recording.
there.
Good stuff.
Great. All
I don't
right.
see any more
I don't
questions.
see any
Thanks,
more
Jack. This was
questions. So
fun.
thank you. It's always fun to work with you, and you know how much I love you, and I can't wait to see you at the end of April in San Diego at AFP
Absolutely.
Icon. Yeah, we'll have
See
some
you
fun.
there.
All right.
Yeah.
Peace and love to
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.